Hello and welcome once again to Beyond the Physical with me, your host, Sitara. I'm here with one of my favorite comedians, Miss Antonia Nagy. Did I pronounce that correctly?
I know it's spelled Nagy, but it's pronounced vagina.
No. Okay, so one of my favorite comedians, Choni Vagina.
It's pronounced Naj, like massage.
Oh, I love that. All right, beautiful. Well, she is a somatic comedian, one of the first and only I've ever been connected to. Tony's work has really created such a powerful ripple, I would say, in the online world and also in the hearts of those who listen, in the sense that you just have such a unique way of talking about some very challenging and hard topics of conversation and delivering them in a way that's receivable, that's funny, that's comedic, that is inspiring as well. And so I'd love to hear from you. What was it that really opened up the idea to delivering some of these like really strong political messages in a way that is funny and receivable?
I think the short answer is many, many years of experimentation. I mean, I've been very interested in how to broadcast information for decades. So I'm not someone that was like, oh, I just had this cute little idea and then whoops, everybody loved it. That's not my story. I've definitely been working for a really, really, really long time and experimenting and trying different methods and different modalities of how to communicate. So I think for me personally, it definitely was like a lot of trial and error.
I love that you're saying that, and thank you for sharing that just authentically and honestly. Similarly, in my line of work and teaching people how to trust their intuition, it's exactly that. I tell them it's trial and error. It's stubbing our toe. It's hearing the ping and not listening. But I can see how that parallel is for you, especially in, it can be really disheartening when you spend a lot of time on an idea or a piece of content or something like that, and then it goes out into the world and it kind of flops and it doesn't really do much. So how have you been able to find that trial and error and also the resilience that it takes to continue to find that spaciousness in what works and what inspires others?
Oh, I mean, the amount of rejection and flops and no's and uh-uhs and like I've gotten is shamanic. I think that like anything, you also have to practice at being rejected. You have to practice at things not working. You have to practice at hearing no. I mean, there was a time when, I worked months on a project and I've written scripts and I'll send it to someone. I'm like, this is perfect. This person's so perfect for it. And they'll be like, no. And then I'll weep and cry. And then I'm depressed. So I've done all that. And I think over time, you just do less of it because it's almost like, oh, I can't spend my whole life reacting to all the rejection I get as part of it. And I think the other thing that was relevant was separating my sense of self and the work that I create. And I think that happens for both positive feedback and negative feedback. So if you're going to really get off on positive feedback, then you're going to really suffer from negative feedback. And I had to create a distance from all feedback, positive and negative. So obviously there is, a tinge of something when I receive positive feedback versus negative feedback, but it's more of a tinge than some overwhelming sensation. I'm like, everybody loves me. And then oh, this person hates me. I really try to remain neutral to all feedback as much as possible. I'm not saying I achieve that always. I'm saying that that's the practice. Neutral to feedback and creating a chasm between the art you create and this being me. Like, I can make a video and someone could be like, this video is a piece of shit. Like, that doesn't mean I have to be like, oh, then I'm a piece of shit because Scooter 76 puss bag thinks I am, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah, you are absolutely sharing some very potent, I would say, wisdom, because it does take, like you're saying, the trial and error to be able to embody that and also say it as matter of factly as you are. And there was a book that I read years ago, talking about, 37 ways to boost your coaching practice or something along those lines. And one of the things he talks about was playing the no game. It's like building that resilience to rejection. And it's one of the things that I like to say, really develops your character in growing a soul-centered business. It's people that choose to develop something and put something out there that comes from the core of their own heart and core of their own expression. It leaves no stone unturned. So it's like you sharing that, and thank you for just sharing it in such a brilliant and matter-of-fact way, because it's so easy, especially as a budding entrepreneur or a budding artist or a budding musician, where you put your heart and soul into something and you receive that kind of rejection or pushback. It's so easy to let that influence your output and influence your creativity. And so I really do believe that that also separates, the grit that we have to put into finding that pathway of success and finding that pathway of inspiration that does actually get the results of why we're doing it in the first place, which would be to inspire others. Or actually, let me ask you that. What is your driving inspiration as to why you choose to create and focus your energy and attention on what you're sharing?
Okay. I do want to circle back to something you said though, and then
Yes.
we can talk about that question, is that I think there is this conflation between having an emotional reaction to something and the creative process. So I think when we can allow ourselves time and space to have a genuine emotional reaction of disappointment, anger, rage, sadness, that's perfectly fine. Like, those emotional reactions to rejection, negativity, what have you, is, I think, to be expected. I think it's normal. I think it's to be embraced, and something to process and have compassion for yourself and give yourself time. I think where it gets problematic is that if those feelings then deter you from the creative process. So maybe not letting yourself really feel sadness, depression, whatever, will deter you from the creative process because you're constipated, you're emotionally constipated.
Yeah.
So, like, do I feel the same heartbreak that I used to with rejections? 100% no, I really don't anymore. But did I feel heartbreak like worse than any dude? Yes. For a long time, I would feel a devastating heartbreak with certain rejections, especially if I really cared about it or worked really hard on it. And now I have more muscles around it. If that makes sense. But in terms of like the creative process of continuing to create, regardless of whatever emotional turmoil one goes through, I think for me, my creative process is highly entwined with my spiritual process, in the sense that a spiritual practice or a spiritual process gives life meaning. And for me, my creative process also gives life meaning. So anything that happens to me in my life, good or bad, I view through the lens of content and like inspiration. And this is something to write about. This is something to talk about on stage. This is something to dance about. This is something to make a video about. Like, nothing is sacred with me. If you fuck me, you will see a video about it. I might wait a couple weeks. So you might be like, wait, is this about me? Yes, it is about you. Always. It is about you. So anything that happens to me, I make meaning of all these events by making art around everything that happens to me. So I do think that like, and then my spiritual practice also. So like anything that happens to me, a person's a big dick, they're a big dick to me. I'm like, well, this is part of my spiritual growth. Thank you for being a guru. You know, it's like I rationalize all my pain, all my suffering through this being my spiritual journey, which I am on constantly. So I don't know. I mean, like you could say I'm just justifying all things that happen to me through the lens of spirituality and artistic inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I align with that completely, which is a lot of the principles behind part of my creations, which is the grow your soul-centered business. And that's exactly what I mean by it leaves no stone unturned. And thank you for clarifying with the rejection piece that it isn't about bypassing and the Pollyanna, like, la, 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 they said no and everything is fine. It is feeling those pieces of rejection. And I want to speak to that a little bit more because this was something that really helped me understand that. And especially growing through family karmic stuff, the big, thick, heavy, deep ones that, you know, will for me in my family experiences, laid me out for weeks at a time, like that level and that depth of rejection. But there's a movie that Ashley Judd is in. I don't remember when it was made, but it's called Double Jeopardy. And Double Jeopardy was that her husband and her, they were on a boat out in the middle of the ocean. They were on a sail trip and he faked his own death. And so she was charged with murder, but she knew that she didn't murder him. And so she was in jail. And of course, from her cellmates and all this, learned about Double Jeopardy, that if she had already served the crime, then she could actually like murder him. And this is kind of morbid, but she could murder him in public and she had already served it. So she would be like kind of off the hook. And there was a really interesting message that I felt I was able to embody in the awareness of pain and that level of rejection. Because once you already feel it, even let's say in a relationship, if you have a codependent bond with somebody that you like are resisting what you are fearing, them going away, the abandonment or them lying or whatever it is. But if you already feel it and accept that that's a potential or that's a possibility or that can happen when you get into this relationship, then you've already felt the pain. You've already let go. You've already acknowledged that that's there. And so if and or when it happens, that sensation, it doesn't rock you. It doesn't rock the boat. It doesn't, you know, influence, like you're saying, that neutrality. And that's how I was able to find and develop that kind of sense of neutrality. And also, you know, the years of rejection or somebody doesn't want to buy my program or doing sales calls and, you know, yada, yada, yada. I would say one of the biggest mistakes that I've made in my business in my own creation process is allowing some of the feedback from others that were at their own limitations influence how I was creating. And I would say that was happening, you know, as I was a baby entrepreneur, like stepping into the field and trying to figure things out. So I'm really grateful for the way that you're sharing this message, because I think it will really land for a lot of people that are listening.
And to avoid influence, I think, is impossible, because
Yeah.
influence is necessary as well. And we live in community and we're creating products or we're creating art or we're creating connections with others. And therefore, influence is part of the entanglement that is unavoidable. I think the question is discerning what influence to listen to and what influence to not listen to. And I mean, I've had friends who I trust a lot who has given me great advice, you know, and who've, you know, been a great support system, give me the feedback, oh, I don't think you should do this type of video anymore. And like those videos were my most successful. But sometimes it's like, well, I'm going to actually double down and do the opposite of what you're saying. And sometimes I've listened to people and we'll never know the path not taken. We'll only know the path taken. But I think that, you know, taking that advice is part of learning, you know, and then you're like, oh, that was not the best advice for me. You know, like you can't learn something unless you go through. I don't think, I mean, maybe you can, I don't know. My personal journey, I've never learned something that I haven't gone through.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, it's like wisdom, I don't think is actually passed down at all. I think wisdom only comes from experience. Like I could go back to my 25-year-old self and be like, know your worth, girl, like don't get into business with people that are going to take advantage of you, or like, don't be in relationships with people that are using you. And I could tell myself that, and I would still be like, fuck off. I'm going to make all these decisions anyway. Like, I don't think I can pass on wisdom to anybody, not even my past self. The only thing I can do is share an experience. So when someone else is maybe in a similar experience and they're going through their own like wisdom growth, they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that bitch said that once, and that adds up, but like nothing I say is going to stop anyone from doing anything, and I think that's the thing that like people need to understand about themselves, is like, you're probably going to have to go through it before you learn it.
Mm-hmm.
At least I did.
Yeah. So to that being said, would you also consider wisdom being able to actually hear from and learn from other people's mistakes so that you don't have to go through it yourself?
But go through the mistakes yourself. What's wrong with that? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, do a mistake, and then you're like, oh, okay. I don't know. I don't think avoiding mistakes should be a goal that we have personally, because I don't know, like life has texture, like mistakes are part of life. Like I think it's like I have a child, and I can okay, I'll give you a great example. My daughter had beautiful long hair, and I personally like long hair. Whatever, patriarchal conditioning I have, I accept it. But I love long hair. My daughter's hair is blonde and beautiful. And she's like, I'm going to cut my hair. And I was like, I don't think you should cut your hair. And she's like, I'm going to cut my hair. And I'm like, okay, fine. It's your head. Do whatever you want. And one of my besties she cuts hair, and she cut hair in like a very nice salon in Newton, Mass, which is like an uppity, suburban town of Boston, for many years. My friend is a good hairdresser. The other hairdressers in my area, not shitting on country living or whatever, but are not as good as my friend, right? But my daughter's like, I want to get my hair cut before school. And I'm like, well, my friend, Sierra, she cannot cut your hair because she's starting school and she needs to like get herself together. And like maybe in a month, she will be in her schedule and she can cut your hair. And she's like, my daughter's like, no, I need my hair cut before school. I just want to go to the salon around here and get my hair cut. And I'm like, all right. I knew she was going to get a bad haircut. She goes, she gets a awful haircut. She cried for 3 days. She has not worn her hair down once. And it's been 9 months, okay? But that girl is never going to rush a haircut again. Like if I just didn't let her get her haircut and then like had Sierra cut her hair when she could, my daughter would have never learned that valuable lesson of patience, and that sometimes you got to wait for something, So I don't think protecting people from their mistakes is like always the best idea, at least
right.
in my worldview, because now my daughter knows this to be true about her hair. And now she can make different decisions. And it's not just going to be because my mom told me I had to wait, Right.
So with that, would you think, or maybe you've seen this, is there a way that experience has also helped her to build trust in your life experience, in knowing maybe when to push or when to be patient?
I mean, we'll see as her teenage years continue to blossom. So like, this is the other question, is like people coming to you for advice versus you handing out advice, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm just like blasting out thoughts that I have to people, they may not consent to that, So as a person, I always ask for consent. Like, do you want feedback? Because I personally believe I give amazing advice, right? And I ask for consent, but do people always follow my advice? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I don't, when they do, sometimes it works and I feel like, oh, cool, I provided a service. But the only reason why my advice worked is because they sought it out. They asked for it. They gave me consent, and then they trusted me enough to experiment with the advice I was giving them. So I like it. I personally like advice. I like giving advice. I like exchanging advice, but I think that can only be done in a very like trusting, consensual vibe. And I also think my personal relationship to advice is not about me, and it's actually not even about my experience. It's about me tapping into what I think that person needs to hear. And maybe, of course, my experience or my thoughts or whatever are going to play in, but I really try to like take my objectives and to take my programming and take my conditioning and to take my assumptions off the table when I participate in like advice giving. And so if I'm going to make a video where I'm like giving advice, I'm not giving advice to anybody but myself. All I'm doing is sharing an experience I had and the advice I am giving to myself. And if that's valuable to people or interesting to people, that is purely because they consented to hearing that, but I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about what I just went through. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I really subscribe to a lot of the beliefs that we teach the medicine we need, or we share the medicine we need. And part of that is that we're embodying the lessons that we have just gone through. And I think one of the best ways to really learn something and embody it is to teach it. And that usually comes after we've experienced the lessons.
Yeah.
Even for myself in leading courses, or like just recently did a 3-day quantum leap intensive, I experienced a full shift like a week before. And I think that's part of, I don't know if it's part of like the genetic creation, because like you're saying, you think through the lens of content. I think that's a natural thing for people who are designed to be teachers or be leaders or be something in that sense. And it was one of the things that I also noticed when I very first started doing meditations is I would start experiencing the growth. And it's almost like I would start hearing the higher self or the requests of the lessons that people would be going through that were coming in it like a week before, or sometimes 2 weeks before. If I was leading a retreat, I would go through the growth that was meant to come through. Like a couple weeks before. So I do believe that there is like a multi-dimensional field of, especially if you are learning something, you're sharing that piece of content. And then the people that find that content, because not everybody that follows you is going to see every single piece of content, right? But there may be a ping that comes inside of them that's like, go to Instagram right now, and your video pops up.
Yes.
And it's like the one thing that shifts the needle that they go,
I needed to hear this. Yeah.
Yes. So I do think that there is like a complexity to even you saying I'm teaching what I'm, experiencing, or it's for me. And simultaneously, collectively, we're learning a lot of those lessons. And I do think that's why certain people are drawn to certain people or teachers or lessons or books or whatever it is, where it's like that one sentence that they hear, it's like the straw that, in Kerplunk, where you like pull that last one and all the things come through, all the balls come through. It's like that. I really do believe that it can be like that. And for those people that are designed to be natural teachers, whether you want to accept that term or not, doesn't matter. It's like that there's a yearning inside that wants to share the lessons that you are creating or that you are embodying. And so, yeah, when it comes to maturity or wisdom, or whether you're ready to ask for advice or not, I grew up with a massive issue with authority, and how that translated to me in developing my gifts was I also would challenge my inner authority. I would feel the ping. I would know through claircognizance, know the right direction to go in or what was best for me. And still I would have this inner challenge with authority. My inner rebel was like not ready to hear the guide. Gemini moon. So back and forth all the time. So I really muse on, when do you receive feedback? When do you not? How it's a cha-cha of discernment. That's really fun. But I want to kind of shift gears a little bit, because one of the things that I have found so incredible, really. And one of the reasons, you know, I found you and chose to follow and stay connected to your work for quite a while now is how you deliver some really, really challenging political messages, and the way that you deliver them in a way that is engaging and doesn't turn people off, especially people like, I don't want to get involved in politics. I don't want to hear, you know, la, 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 la. You have such a powerful way of sharing relevant information that I do think is really important for a lot of people to pay attention to. So what inspired you to start going down that road, and what's the feedback that you've gotten from specifically like the politically exposing content that you share?
Well, I've been doing political content from the beginning, so that's not new for me. And I think it's just like different ways and different ways of talking about it, you know, either through sketch comedy or through like my interpretive dances or through stand-up comedy and films and songs, you know. I think that I am a socially conscious political person. I have been since I was a child. So this isn't something that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna like pick this up and talk about it because it's on trend, you know, like that's been a huge part of my programming from my parents, my conditioning, my exposure, my interest, my education, my conversations and personal connections, you know, like this isn't just something I'm doing, you know. I think it's actually something I am. It's like deeply integrated. So in that sense, I've read, you know, a lot, you know, like I have a lot of my own opinions. I think the thing is that I think a lot of people learn about things enough to talk about what other people think. And you know, I'm a philosophy major. I'm somebody who is interested in my own analysis. So I have taken ideas and then I form my own thoughts, you know, to the best of my capacity. Of course, one could argue that, you know, all thoughts are just like regurgitated and respoken from like, you know, 30,000 years ago Buddhists, like also true, you know, like I mean, if I was a Buddhist from 30,000 years ago and I like time traveled, I don't know if there were Buddhists 30,000 years ago. Okay. I know my timeline's a little off, but like, all I'm saying is that like, I would be so irritated by like modern science being like, oh, we should like be mindful. I'd be like, you fuckers, like you're spending billions of dollars on your research when we've been talking about this since we were living in caves. Like, are you kidding? Like this knowledge, wisdom, it's all been, I really feel like we're saying the same thing over and over and over again. So like, as I just said, I'm like, I'm so original in my thoughts. Also, just saying the same thing over and over again as everybody is. So maybe I'm not so original in my thoughts. My only point is that I am open to speak my fucking thoughts, you know, and not just say a thought I heard. And I think that happens through taking ideas and mixing them up in your own brew, you know. I like to brew things. If I'm saying something that someone else has said, I'm not that interested in what I'm saying, you know, like rhetoric bores me, like all these ways in which people talk where you're like, I've heard this before. I'm just like, it doesn't have your chi in it. If I can't add to a conversation, I'm not going to participate in a conversation. So I know I contradicted myself 10 times and I stand by all those contradictions, but I have to feel like I'm adding something. You know, I'm adding my own flavor. Like there's my flavor to that conversation or that thought. And in terms of like, what was your real question? Your real question is like, why are you doing this? Why? What was your question?
I'm really curious.
What's the point?
Yeah. Like what brought you? And I mean, you did kind of answer it in the sense that it's something that has been I'll say this, the one thing that I'm really taking away from your response is that you just are not afraid to speak to what a lot of other people may be hesitant to polarize, you know, opinions or this or that. But one of the things that I have really appreciated about your content is that it isn't yes, you say that you have a lot of opinions, but I've also recognized that a lot of it is simply like, this is what is, these are the facts, this is the research that I've done, this is what I'm sharing with you, and not necessarily trying to sway somebody one way or another. It's just, this is what's going on in case you weren't aware of it. And I love the way that you have been able to do that. And part of it is because I do think with my platform and message, there is not a lot of fear, but I've faced so much censorship that it has silenced more of what I feel that I can say on social media. And so when I see somebody like you presenting it through dance and just like somatic expression, I'm like, fuck yes, like, please keep going, because it needs to be out there. And the fear of freedom of speech is definitely a part of our reality since the last couple of years. And so
Okay,
that
I know
I admire about what you're doing.
exactly what I want to say. I am not trying to convince anybody of anything.
Right.
At all. All I'm doing is sharing.
Mm-hmm.
There's not one bone in my body that I don't have any intention of convincing anybody anything, so I am sharing, and whether or not like my sharing is meaningful to you, that's on you. That's your journey. But what I do know is that you will remember I said it if I say it in a way that's interesting, whether you agree with me or not. Like Ben Shapiro, he talked about one of my videos and was like, made fun of me in a way that I actually thought was like, LOL. But like, he also liked me, and he was like, oh, she's wrong. But like, so what? You got the information. You heard the information I said. The US Army and our military is the #1 contributor to climate change. So you heard that information, and you can disagree with it, but you heard it from my pelvis. And so I think my point is to just be like, hear me out. Like, agree with me, disagree with me, who gives a shit? Just hear me out and let's have a conversation. I also am not that like attached to like being right. I'm not that attached to like doubling down on my own thoughts. Like, I actually like love it. And look, I actually love being right. Like, you see what I just did? I do. I love being right. I like relish in it. Like, I get like sunbathe in my own rightness, but also like I am sometimes wrong. And then I'm like, oh, well, now's an opportunity to like examine that further. I do think having a philosophical mindset is much more interesting than having a historical mindset or a scientific mindset, because philosophy is about questioning and asking questions, and conversation, dialogue, like all of these things. And I guess I get so turned off by anything that's like didactic, anybody who thinks they're so correct. It's just like, go fuck yourself. Like, I'm just not interested in how correct you think you are, even though I sometimes feel very correct, like, go fuck myself too when I have that energy. So I don't know. I think that like when you think you know anything, the arrogance of that is just like, get over it. And I do believe that a meditation practice, like my Buddhist practice, my experiences in these retreats, and the retreats I've done are very like, I think there's like, I am very aware of like when people's egos are very loud, and you can have many spiritual circumstances where there are very loud egos, and there is something that's kind of soft about like a real hardcore Buddhist experience where you're like, oh, these are very serious practicing Buddhists, like they're not like, they don't like have like the accoutrement that's like letting everyone know like I'm spiritual. You know what I mean? Like, there's no identifying factors. They're just like people in plain clothes that are silent. Like you don't, I can't project anything onto them. I try, I make all these stories of these plain clothes people, and I was wrong every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my favorite phrases is, a lion shouldn't have to tell you it's a lion. And
yeah, hell yeah. Yeah.
There's so much in that, in what I would say as the new age spiritual community. I have, as an example, I have very, very, very Christian family. I have very, very, very Mormon family. I have very, very Jewish family. I really have like a very eclectic bunch. And then I'm here, you know, as the family psychic, which triggers all sorts of stuff 8 ways to Sunday. But one of the things when I was growing up with my cousin, she got the little Christian fish, like super teeny tiny, tattooed on her ankle. And I was talking to her about it afterwards, and she was like, I really kind of wish I didn't get this. And she said, because what I want is not for someone to see a symbol on me and to associate that with being a Christian. I want the illumination of that light to come through my eyes. And so it's a felt expression. And it was something that she said, I think I was like 15 when I heard her say that. And it landed so clearly for me that the authenticity and the expression of embodiment does not come from an outfit. It does not come from accoutrements, if you will.
Yeah.
It comes from the authenticity. I call it vibrational integrity, because you cannot fake frequency. You cannot fake a vibration. And so that vibrational integrity that just emanates from the inside out, it's so refreshing and so lovely to be in that field of authenticity, no matter what the opinions are, or the rightness, or the ego, or the anything else. That
I like that.
Yeah, that authenticity and honesty, it's so refreshing in this world right now. It's so refreshing to, again, whether you agree or not, it doesn't necessarily matter, but to hear rigorous honesty that's coming from a place of just, this is, like you were sharing, this is simply what I'm sharing. This is simply what my life experience is. And I think that's real. I know that's why I really admire you. I admire the way that you are presenting things. I honor and appreciate your boldness and your bravery just with the current climates and the stuff that I've experienced with social media and all the shenanigans that are out there. I've really found a lot of just refreshing reprieve in the way that you're showing up in the world. So 100 times over, 1,000 times over, you're very welcome. And so with that, I do want to encourage everyone who is here listening, find Tony on Instagram. We have a link, easy to find description here. If you're not already connected, definitely be connected there. We've got some freebies and some information about the work that she is doing, and I'm sure will be doing. I feel like there's a lot more to come and some openings with that creation. But Tony, is there anything that you would like to share? Any pings of closing thoughts before we go ahead and close out our conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like we didn't really talk about like the somatic movement dance part, which is what I would be offering and sharing. So,
yes.
You know, I am a dance teacher. I've been a dancer for many, many years. And one of the things that I do, you know, that brought us together were these dance videos where I would be like pontificating and pondering about society and culture, like through the language of interpretive dance. And that, especially during COVID, I started doing a lot of like online classes and working with people that aren't trained dancers at all around somatic expression and somatic movement as a means of working with their own healing around issues that may be manifesting in the body, creating stagnation in the body, that maybe cannot truly be understood or rationalized. Like there's so many of us that are able to have the conversation of like, I am like this because my mother treated me like this and my father was avoidant and this anxiousness. Like we can have a intellectual conversation about a lot of our personality traits or our behavior, yet it's really difficult to change our behavior, our personal behavior, and to change our somatic or body relationship to certain things. And so I have been doing a lot of work with people and workshops and classes around addressing a lot of these deep internal programming, conditionings, mental blockages that are manifesting in the body. So that would be my offering, is to do some work around somatic healing.
I absolutely love that. For me, dance is medicine. Ecstatic dance has saved my life, dancing at music festivals, all of it. And I agree, I would say the world definitely needs more way showers to teach people how to get into their bodies
Yes, and movement, you know, I think
Yes.
dance is a word that scares people because they're like, I can't dance, you know, but like literally everyone can move. And so that's what we're doing is we're moving. It begins with moving. Dancing is just a byproduct of movement.
Yes. I love that. Absolutely love that. Well, Toni, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you here with us. Again, everyone who's tuning in, if you haven't already, go check out her Instagram. You will be wildly entertained for sure, possibly educated, hopefully beyond all inspired to be able to find that message within your heart and to share. But Toni, truly, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. For those you haven't heard from across the ethers of the internet, because we really, truly don't know how many lives we have touched, I will simply say thank you for the inspiration, the wisdom, and the insights that you have shared. I'm happy to be an ally with you in this world. We'll see how the whole thing unpacks, but thank you so much for participating in the Beyond the Physical. It's been an honor to have you here. Yes, yes. All right. And for those that are tuning in, I look forward to seeing you in the next interview. Ciao, ciao.